when I heard who the director was Alan Parker, and you've got to remember at that particular time, Alan Parker could do no wrong. He had come out with Midnight Express, he'd come out with Birdie, Angel Heart. The man was just at the top of his game. Alan Parker was going to direct The Commitments. This was the biggest thing I thought at the time in Ireland. It was absolutely superb. So we're delighted 20 years later now to get Roddy along with us today. And it's a very informal Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Roddy, well, now's the chance to ask the questions now. Anybody? Johnny?
Yeah.
Roddy, I was just wondering, obviously since the Commitments was written, and we had economic boom come in, how would your portrayal of working class look different now?
If I was writing the book now, there are things that would have to be different. I think essentially the story would be the same. A bunch of kids, they're kids now. There were people who were a little bit younger than me then when I wrote the book 25 years ago, you know, in 1986, first half of 1986. So they weren't, and I was 27, I think, and I saw them as being 19, 20, 21. Now, you know, I'd be more than 30 years older than them. So whether I would be interested in writing it is one thing, but if I was, regardless of economic conditions, some of the rhythm of the language be a bit different. There'd be a lot more likes in every sentence. And that's hard actually, you know, because I've a new book out for young people. I think they're called, they used to be called children, but now the marketing people call them young people. And the central character is a 12-year-old girl. And I put in all the likes that reality told me were there, like every second word. It was like, and like, and like. And then it was almost impossible to read. And actually the character came across being a bit stupid, whereas that is not the case at all. So I took out most of the likes and left a few, just to give the, you know, just to get the flavour of the language, and it worked much better. So there'd be words, you know, that were, I think most of the words that the Commitments use in the dialogue would still be there, but there'd be other words as well, and sentences would be different. I reread the book recently. I hadn't read it in years and years and years. And I thought, you know, the tendency to put "but" at the end of sentences. Robbie Keane being the world's foremost expert on it, but you know that way, even though he's been out of the country for years, but. And I thought they wouldn't be there, but actually they are there in the dialogue. I was quite pleased with that. There's other things that have nothing to do with the recession. Mobile phones. You know, they're a curse. I think, you know, they're great, they're brilliant. You know, I've reared my children on mobile phone. They don't know what country I'm in and they still go home, you know, so it's great. But all those Jimmy rushing around the place, bringing the band together, looking at places, doing things, all that mobility that is part of his personality wouldn't be needed. He'd be emailing and tweeting and, you know, so that physical movement of people from place to place, you'd need it for band rehearsals and that, but a lot of that kind of energy wouldn't be there. It would have to be, I'd have to depict it somewhat differently. But, and I suppose because back in 1986, I don't think people used the word recession at all because it was normal life. You know, I remember when I left school in 1976, the guys who was in my class who were looking for work, I think, and it would have been about 2/3 of them in the classroom, maybe more. I think they all had jobs within 3 or 4 months, you know. A few years later, when my brother left school, it was a different story. But after that, that seemed to be normal life. It seemed to be, this was the way it was in Ireland. And the success, whatever you measure that came a bit later, was a bit of a surprise, and actually in ways it still is. So I think the tone of the thing would be a bit different because now it's still a shock. The fact that there is no work, the fact that people are having to go. And there's a lot of, you know, strange sentimentality about it as well, in that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, a kid going to the airport, smiling, you know, going off on a big adventure. Now it's almost insisted upon that there be tears, that there be, you know, there be heartache. There, you know, it's only, the wedding planners will soon be planning, you know, immigrant wakes. And so it's there are things that are similar, that resonate, but there would be differences. Because I think this recession, we're more aware of the fact that it's a recession. And I think a lot of it, you know, the developers who gambled on our country a few years ago, the consequences are only beginning to arrive now. They're only beginning to arrive. And so there's an edge to it. You get the sense sometimes people are afraid to exhale in case something else happens, you know, and this mysterious world of the euro. And sometimes we're told that exports are going through the roof and other things are great, and yet the country's in tatters, you know. And we're aware of it in a way that we weren't in the past. It was kind of, as I said, normal life. So there would be things that would be different. But essentially, in the middle, you have a bunch of young people who want to express themselves. And soul is still as timeless as it ever was. You know, I listened to the Four Tops singing any of their songs, Bernadette or something like that, and it doesn't to me. You know, I was a kid when it came out, and years and years and years later, it hasn't aged a bit. It's still timeless, you know. So the songs would still be perfect. And one of the reasons I chose soul as the music was that it is completely timeless, you know, and it always will be. You know, could have gone for, you know, I wrote the book in 1986. It wouldn't have been to my taste, but it could have gone for that new romantic stuff. No guitars, you know, and it became hopelessly dated very, very quickly, I think. Have I answered your question?
No, I was just wondering what some of the comedy would take.
No, not at all. No. No. A few years back, I'm involved in a place called Fighting Words, a writing centre for young people. And we do this book project with a group of transition year students every year. And the first time we were doing it, we had a gang from Larkin Community College from Sean McDermott Street. Great bunch of kids. And I asked an American writer friend who was involved in a similar place in San Francisco, and he'd been open 6 or 7 years, and I asked him, how will I get them to start writing? And he said, just ask them what makes them angry, because it works for him back in the United States. So we asked these kids what made them angry. And they were kind of puzzled by the question, because actually, despite the fact that they had loads of reasons to be angry, they weren't. Getting up in the morning made them angry. Maths made them angry. But none of the big issues made them angry at all, even though they're living bang in the middle of these big issues. And I felt to try and force it on them would be wrong, you know, because they're the exact same as any other 16, 17-year-olds, 15, 16-year-olds anywhere else in the world. And maybe the darker side of what it is that they have will emerge later on, but at that point in their lives, no, you know. So actually, the darker the times, I think, the more necessity there is for laughter, I suspect, you know. I've often noticed that sometimes when I write a line that I know will get people laughing, I'm not feeling particularly good myself, you know. So it's not that I'm saying that I have to make myself miserable to write a good line, but there's no direct relationship between the economic circumstances and the ability to laugh, I think. If all other considerations, if your mental health is good, which is a big question mark, I suppose, these days.
The Dublin humour.
Yeah.
In the film itself, while Alan was directing it, he captured it very well.
Mm.
I mean, did you have to tutor him on the Dublin humour? He managed to get a grip of it?
Well, he loved the book, you know. It's a bit like Stephen Frears a few years later, you know, with The Snapper in the Van. Stephen always had a copy of the book with him. It was always under his arm or beside him, and we chatted an awful lot. And Stephen was different to Alan. But Alan loved the book, and the first few times I met him, he was talking about the book, and he knew pages. I suppose once a writer has finished a book, very often they never look at it again. I think it's quite a healthy thing to just leave it alone and go on and do something else. So, but his knowledge of the book was far more, if you like, up to date and more forensic than mine. He was talking about a line on this page, and then when I met the producer, the woman who eventually co-produced it, Linda Miles. And I asked her, you know, would the language remain intact? And she said, yeah, because I asked her, there had been a bit of interest in the book. And I asked every producer, would the language remain intact? And all the others said, no, it's too adult, too coarse, you'd have to change it, it would never get released. And I asked her, would you need stars? People like Molly Ringwald was a big name at the time, or Emilio Estevez, or even Charlie Sheen. There's a thought. Jimmy Rabbit. Charlie Sheen is Jimmy Rabbit. So she said, and again they said, yeah, we'd need a few stars, a few bankable stars, whatever they are. And Linda said no. And then when Alan came along, you see, Alan had the clout, because of all those films you listed, he had the clout to resist all these, as did Stephen Frears, because the Snapper was made for the BBC. And, you know, I wrote a first draft of the script, and I put in all the language intact. And I knew it was going to be a fight, because I'd been forewarned that BBC, being a national broadcaster, that there would be, even though it was going to be broadcast after 10 o'clock or whatever it was, there would be an issue with the language, which now seems quite an old, a dated discussion. But once Stephen became involved, all those moral considerations disappeared. We could have put in any language we wanted, really, because the man had enough clout. And Alan had all this clout, and he could resist the pressure to. In fact, I'm not aware that there was ever any stated pressure to bring in stars or to change the language. The first review of the novel, when it came out, said that it would be of little interest to anybody outside Dublin.
Right.
Yeah, because it was so parochial, I suppose. But the urge, the creative urge, the urge of young people to make music and to form a band is hardly a parochial subject, you know. It's a universal thing.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, I think, what was the appeal. No, he...
Right.
I co-wrote the script, but after that, I had no real involvement at all. Now, the script obviously is vital because it's the foundation of the film. But in terms of, I only visited the set twice and found it really boring.
Right.
Really boring, actually. If it, the temptation, if it had a chance to put in a car chase or something, it would have been great just to go, because one of the best days on a set I ever had was with a van, when the van went into the water, because we had 2 sets of tracks and dolly mount with the cameras.
Yeah.
We had 2 cameras, and that was great. I thought, what lad, this is what it's all about. This is making films, you know.
Yeah.
So that was great. That was a great and very little time. You know, what's that time between darkness and daylight? What do they call it?
Twilight?
Yeah, that's what do they call it in the film business?
Magic hour.
The magic hour.
Magic hour.
Yeah. So that was great. A bit of buzz, a bit of excitement, you know. But no, I found the whole filming thing a bit overwhelming as well, really. There was a lot of walkie-talkies that are completely unnecessary.
When you finally got to see the finished product on the screen, were you happy with it?
I was, yeah. I was a teacher, and they were having a screening in the Savoy for cast and crew, and Alan was there, and I asked for the morning off. It was a Wednesday, and I asked for the morning off and arranged for my classes to be taken by friends and colleagues. So I was there with my wife, and very, very nervous, because I was hoping I'd like it, and because the thing was edited in Los Angeles, I'd seen nothing. Right. He sent me a rough cut of about 3 minutes worth of stuff, and I had a sense of that. And then I just saw it the once. It was a videotape, going back video, and I said it to a friend of mine. We were going for a pint. Come in and I'd show you this. I was very excited about it. Put it in, and we watched the first 3 minutes of Neighbours, because my wife had taped over the. So we're still married. So I only saw it the once, so I didn't really have a strong sense of what it was going to be like at all. And I think about 20 minutes in, I began to relax. I began to think, well, this is good, this is nice, this is the spirit of the book, is really intact, and the locations, and there was something very charming about it, quite rightly charming, and I thought the cast were great, they were really great. So I began to really enjoy it then. So yeah, I did like it a lot. There were little bits that I didn't like. There are too many holy statues around.